welcome to episode 3 of QueerTrek, a Tricorder Transmissions LGBTQ plus community podcast. My name is Marty, and I am joined by my co-host, Heather. Heather, how are you doing today?
I have bourbon and really terrible tea, but I'm still happy because it's bourbon.
I have room temperature Modelo, but otherwise...
So we're both suffering in our own way.
We are.
But we're happy, so that's what's important. Yeah, I'm super happy to be back, so thank you for asking.
You're welcome. Before we introduce our guest for this evening, we would like to tell you more about the show in case you're new. QueerTrek is an LGBTQ community-empowered Star Trek podcast where the topics come from you and your suggestions. Each show, our host will be joined from guests. Each show, our host will be joined by guests from the LGBTQ community who will share their stories while discussing the subjects they choose within the scope of Star Trek's 52-year history, ranging from personal stories, episode examinations, characters, and themes in Star Trek, all from a queer perspective. If you would like to submit a topic idea or if you would like to be a guest on QueerTrek, you can reach us by email at QueerTrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, on Twitter @QueerTrekPod, or you can use the handy-dandy submission form at QueerTrek.thetricordertransmissions.com. This is your podcast, and we need you to make this happen. Heather, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about our Patreon page?
Patreon is the best ever. We have like 50 patrons, which is amazing, and we love each and every one. You can become a Patreon member very easily. You go to www.patreon.com/thetricordertransmissions. You can donate anything from $1 to infinity, which we'll never see, but we're happy with $1. But that gives you access to lots of fun perks. We have a special pin/button, however you like to define it. And apparently, if you are a QueerTrek patron, you even may get a special QueerTrek pin, although I have to check on the status of where they are in the world. But we have, special pins, and then you get access to our unedited versions of the podcast, which have all of our bloopers and behind the scenes discussions and secrets that you won't hear anywhere else. And then Patreon hangouts, which we try to do once a month. So keep an eye. Usually on our Twitter feeds is where we do that. Our main Tricorder Twitter feed is @Tricorder Show. That's where we tend to post the Patreon details or the Patreon hangout details. But yeah, we love watching our Patreon family grow. And if you happen to make it to STLV, you have an invite to our special Tricorder birthday party that we have every year. So please come and join us. Again, it's just patreon.com/thetricordertransmissions.
Wonderful. And we, of course, are joined by a very special guest today. We are joined by Kira. Kira, say hello.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking.
No
Super
problem.
excited to be here.
So we are going to be talking about asexuality and non-binary, specifically characters in Deep Space Nine. Is that correct?
That is very correct.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and start with you and your story. Go ahead and just start with how you identify, and we'll go from there.
All right, great. So I identify as asexual and non-binary, so I can go through a little bit about what each of those means to me. I don't want to be policing anyone's identities, so this especially is kind of just how I use it to describe myself. So I'll just go ahead with that.
Yeah.
So what asexual is defined as is literally you do not experience sexual attraction. Like everything else, this is a spectrum. I'm on that spectrum somewhere. I'm not completely at one end or the other. It's asexual to, I believe it's allosexual is the other end of the spectrum. I'm not completely 100% asexual. but I use the term because it's much easier to just use the word asexual than it is to explain how I experience sexual attraction. I've probably experienced it twice in my whole life, and it was back when I was a teen, going through puberty. I haven't really experienced it since, and I'm definitely okay with that. My experiences honestly weren't even that good. So
I'm sorry.
that's okay. Hey, it was not a fun time for me, but it's in the past. I've moved on. I'm happy with where I am. And I'm happy that I've discovered asexuality. It's definitely one of those things that's not very well known.
Yeah.
So I didn't even discover it until I reached college, sophomore, junior year. So that's a pretty large gap in between going through that teenage years to, becoming more mature and growing into an adult. So that's where I am with asexuality. My other identity is non-binary, and that is my gender identity. I remember you guys talked a little bit about this in your last recording with Felicity, which was a great episode, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So non-binary is basically a subset of transgender. It's an umbrella term for people whose identities aren't exclusively male or female, which outside the gender binary. Binary means two, just for people who need a little bit of a math lesson. Not all trans folks are non-binary, but the way I see it, all non-binary folks are trans. Of course, there are some trans people who don't really agree with that. Some non-binary people who don't see themselves as trans, and that's perfectly fine. Again, I'm not policing anyone's identity. Mm-hmm. If they say they're not trans, they're not trans. That's completely up to them. They are still 100% valid in my book. So again, I found non-binary around the same time as I found asexuality. I knew growing up there was always something a little bit, I guess you could say, off about the way I fit into the female gender role. Of course, I came from a family that was, super outdoorsy. We liked to go hiking and all that sort of things. We were a very meat and potatoes family. Everyone liked to wear jeans and T-shirts, that kind of thing. So there have been people who have told me that because of that, my identity cannot be what it is, which I beg to differ. I've also been told that there's no possible way I could know myself 100%, which to an extent is true, but I definitely know myself a lot better than they know me.
Yeah.
I think
no
that's just kind of ridiculous for someone else to tell you that you can't know yourself.
I know, and no matter how close those people are to me, I guess they just don't quite understand. So yeah, I found asexuality and the non-binary identifiers around the same time. I went with a friend when I was in college to our the Gay Straight Alliance Club. I have a couple gay friends that were, wanted to go as first timers. And what they did in these meetings is they actually would go around the room before they even started that night's topic discussion and have everyone introduce themselves along with their name, their pronouns, and how they identify. So it was my first time actually kind of being introduced to different things. I had understood transgender as a concept basically, but I had never met someone who had come out as transgender. I mean, God knows I probably have met 100 transgender people and not even known it. But I remember specifically someone saying they identified as asexual and non-binary, and I was super confused about what those were. So of course, the as soon as the meeting was over and I went home, what I started doing was Googling what these things were. And, one thing led to another, and I sort of found myself, watching YouTube videos and going to websites that had, specific resources for asexual people or people who were outside the gender binary. And I noticed that a lot of my life experiences seem to align with those people's experiences. And it actually was very comforting. I had spent a long time sort of in the dark, I guess you could say. I had no words for what I was feeling, how I was feeling, the way I experienced things. So to finally have something where you could kind of just pinpoint it was a great feeling. And that's how I came to the decision to use those labels for myself. And I've had discussions with people who are close to me that ask me why my labels are even important.
Sorry, he's
Sounds like a
dreaming.
dog. No, it's okay.
Marley.
It's fine.
Sorry.
No,
it's a good dream,
okay.
apparently.
It's the tricorder transmission staple. There's always a pet in there somewhere.
I'm sure my cat will join us at some point. So
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That's way okay. Don't worry. I've had discussions with people who are close to me about why my labels are even important. We live in a day and age where a lot of these things are much more accepted, so labels really shouldn't even matter. Which I agree. I hope one day in the future there won't need to be a national coming out day. We won't need to have lengthy discussions with people about how we understand ourselves, basically. But I told these people that I'm a very organized person. I like to have all of my thoughts categorized in a filing cabinet that's in alphabetical order. And so my labels help me understand myself.
Yeah.
And they definitely help others understand me, because again, the first thing I did after I heard these bizarre terms was I went and Googled what they meant.
Yeah.
So even if it's in just passing by, someone hears the word asexual and they don't know what it means, that might be something they go do, and the snowball effect, maybe they'll start to learn and they'll be aware, and God even knows, maybe they find that it fits their own life experiences.
Can I hijack you for a minute to talk about labels?
Sure.
Because it resonates super strongly with me, because it's a discussion that I have seen over and over again, not just in the last 2 years, but beyond that, where I'm very much into labels. I'm not so similar to you that everything must be organized a certain way. For me, it's that I am ridiculously self-expressive, and I like other people to know who I am. So whether it's Trekkie or a queer person, like I attach to labels because, again, it does help you identify yourself and understand your identity. And I think that for so much of the queer community, beyond gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender, the rest of the spectrum really has been kind of lost out there and not discussed. And most straight people are very unaware of what asexual means or what non-binary means, and struggle with that. And so I see a lot of pushback from the other side that says, well, labels aren't important. It doesn't matter that you're gay. None of that stuff matters. And that to me just invalidates, not only identity, but our attachment to that. And that even plays into when a lot of people, and I think back to an episode of Queer Eye, and I think it was a season 2 episode with the trans man.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, Kira, if you've seen it. Marty and I have talked about it.
It's on my watch list. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's there.
This won't spoil anything. but he had a lot of like gay pride stuff in his house and a lot of rainbow stuff. And the Fab Five came in and they're like, there's just too much rainbow. Like, we've got to tone it down. And they did a beautiful job. Yes. But for so many of us, like, we're just now starting to understand our identity as adults. And so I think it's like labels are great, and getting excited about the pride flag is great. If that helps you feel more comfortable with yourself and you want to scream out into the world, I know who I am, like that's an amazing thing. And I just, sorry to go off on the rant, but I just really struggle this discussion of labels, because for me it's a very good thing. I understand if other people don't want you to label them, absolutely, that's fine. But we're not yet in a world where labels don't matter. We're not yet in a world where people can be LGBTQ and not be murdered. So until that happens, like, I'm going to use my labels, and I'm not using profanity there. There was going to be profanity, but because we're tricorder, we don't do that.
Now I can't use my share noise.
It's just something that I'm very, very passionate about, because it's just something that resonates strongly with how I attach to labels, and I use labels to express myself. And I see a lot of other people in the LGBTQ community doing the same thing, and just being excited because they finally understand who they are, and they have a word to put with an aspect of their personality and their identity. And so I'm all like, fly those flags and put out your labels and scream about who you are, because right now that's super, super, super important. Okay, that my rant is over.
Hey, no, rant is good. I mean, on a side note, there are definitely some days when I'm just sick and tired of explaining myself to people.
Yeah.
So I just go ahead and use the word queer. It's, you're lucky to find people who understand even half of what your identity really is, what your labels mean. So using that word queer is, it's being able to identify yourself without profiling yourself at the same time. It's kind of a almost sort of welcoming but functional terminology. And it's vague enough that people understand that you're not cishet, basically. That's why I enjoy the word queer. I use non-binary as an identifier because the gender binary simply cannot describe me. Okay. I do not identify as either male nor female. If you were to draw a line and put female on one side and male on the other side, put a dot in the middle, and I'm probably a little bit closer to the male side. I have a very masculine of center. I prefer to express myself as a more masculine person. A lot of my quirks and personality traits are more masculine than feminine. I honestly don't really enjoy anything feminine at all. There are a few things, obviously, because, I'm 24 years old. I spent most of my life as a female. So there are certain things I've carried with me that I simply just can't let go of. But if you were to look at that line, I'm like over here.
Yeah.
Non-binary people are nothing new. There's a lot of people out there that like to think it's some new millennial fad. We're those special snowflakes. I mean, don't get me wrong.
We're all each unique and different.
Yeah, and non-binary people aren't confused about their gender identity. Now, there are some who use non-binary while they are figuring themselves out. That's not to be confused with being confused about their gender identity. But, non-binary identities have been recognized for decades and in societies around the world. Some, but not all, non-binary people undergo medical procedures to make their bodies more congruent with their gender identity. I know Felicity was talking about it in her post about, a lot of transgender people who go through hormone replacement therapy, top surgeries, bottom surgeries, the whole 9 yards. There are some things that will change, and if you stop, will sort of backtrack, but there are definitely some things that are permanent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just not where I need to go to express who I am.
I just want to emphasize, I just want to emphasize that for a minute, because it's something that sort of was in my head when we were talking to Felicity. It's like, not everyone's experience is the same, and everyone's decision and what they need for themselves is valid. So even, trans men and women, like, not having any surgery, not doing any hormones at all, like, if you are still a valid, like, your identity is still valid in who you are. And I just really want to emphasize that, because it's something that is struggled with by people transitioning, and with feedback from the rest of the world. And I just want to make that so super clear, is that hormones and surgery are not part of your validity. If they help you to transition and that's your path, then excellent. And if not, then it does not matter. It's what you need to do for yourself.
If you identify as non-binary, then you have a non-binary body, no matter what you look like. If you identify as trans, you have a trans body, no matter what you look like.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a whole nother ball game, but
sorry, I get super passionate about some of this stuff, because I just know that we have listeners out there that really need that reinforcement. And even if it's just some weird person on the podcast, like, I just want to put it out there.
There's definitely ways to be supportive of non-binary people if you consider yourself an ally. You don't have to understand what something means to respect a person. If a person tells you they have a preferred name or a preferred pronoun, please use them. If someone is coming to you with these very personal, private things about themselves, they are trusting you with that information. And if you go ahead and just sort of give them that slap in the face and don't even listen to a word they say, that it really hurts us. It doesn't feel good. You feel sort of backstabbed, sort of betrayed. So me personally, I prefer they them pronouns. Unfortunately for me, I don't really enjoy she her pronouns, but that's the way most people perceive me in society, so that's what they use. And I've learned to become okay with it.
Okay, can I ask you, like, you very much have the right to say, no, I'm not okay with that. So what in you stops you from, is it just because it's just easier, basically?
It's easier. It's definitely also, you never really know what someone's true intentions are going to be. I usually don't tell people my pronouns unless they ask me first. Mostly because, if you tell someone, listen, I don't use she, her, I use they, them, they're going to fight you back with, well, it's grammatically incorrect.
Have you had that happen?
I have. Yeah. That's actually the biggest that roadblock for people using they, them, is because it just sounds so wrong. But honestly, you use it in everyday conversation without even knowing about it. I was talking to my brother once, and he was asking me about this, and I told him, like, listen, if you came up to me and said, oh, where's so-and-so, I would have been like, oh, they're at the park.
Exactly.
Completely unfazes the person. You throw it in everyday conversation. It takes some getting used to if you're just going to use it all the time, but I use it so much. I have friends that use it so much that it's just second nature to me now. But again, with people you don't know or people you don't entirely trust all the way, it's just easier to let them use that pronouns that they think you are. There are times when actually people use he, him for me, which while I don't prefer those pronouns, actually give me a little bit like of an ecstatic feeling. Yes, I was sort of like seen as a masculine person. once.
Heard that.
And
others.
unfortunately, they'll do it, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am."
And then they
I'm like,
correct. Yeah.
Oh.
oh, God. I'm like, you were. Ugh. But yeah, I've almost been arrested in a bathroom once. I was at a hockey game here in Las Vegas, and it was the intermission, and I went to go use the restroom, the ladies' restroom, because I would not feel comfortable in the male restroom with how I present myself. And I was waiting in the 20 million person line, and there was a security guard in there who straight up just grabbed my shoulder and was just like, "Excuse me, sir, you can't be in here." And I had to look at this lady and be like, "Calm yourself," because my voice will give me away if nothing else will, because I have a very feminine voice.
Yeah.
And oh my God, the look on her face, it was priceless. But at the same time, like, I was this close from getting jumped in the bathroom.
Wow.
So more companion restrooms for everyone. If anyone on the business side is listening to this,
Yeah.
please pitch this to your CEOs. It's super important.
Well, a lot of the more liberal businesses are converting all their restrooms to all gender bathrooms, which I am like fully supportive of, because
Yeah.
I don't care where I use the restroom. I just,
Yeah.
you know,
I gotta go where I gotta go. Just put a
my
door there.
restroom at home is all gender, so why can't the restroom at
Yeah.
Starbucks be all gender?
It's like, as long as there's a door there, what does it matter what you're doing on a
Exactly.
toilet behind closed doors? But to continue on with ways to be supportive. So yeah, if someone has a preferred name, preferred pronouns, use them. Try not to make assumptions about a person's gender. That's where they, them really comes in handy. Because if you don't know, they, them is a perfect neutral pronoun to use until you find out otherwise.
Yeah. I think it's similar on the spectrum of people where you may not feel comfortable correcting someone. Someone else may not feel comfortable asking. And like, I really like personally, I would love to live in a world where everyone feels comfortable asking and everyone feels comfortable defending their pronouns. Like, please, can we live there already? I identify as she, her. So that's why I, asked, do you experience this? Because I don't have a lot of friends, or really any friends that I hang out with that identify as they, them. So it's not something that I'm seeing firsthand. And I just, it's important to bring that up and to let people know that, yes, this is the stuff that happens day to day for you.
Right. I mean, I have met some really great people, especially lately, that when I've told them that I use they, them, they're like, "Listen, I know I'm going to mess up, but I'm going to try." And just that simple act of them saying that they're going to try is so much more, it shows so much more to me than what other people are even, than other people have done.
Well, yeah, it goes back to just being respectful and
It's acknowledging your identity and saying, yes, okay, I understand who you are and this is your preference and I will do my best. I mean, like you said, it's really not that hard because we do it every day. And I think there's some memes out there also expressing like how incredibly, how often we use different pronouns or different names for people. But when it comes to this, it's difficult. And I think it's more difficult for some people than others. And I'll say that without insinuation or judgment. But yeah, it's an acknowledgement that I see who you are. I respect who you are. This is new to me. I may mess up, but I'm going to try. And everyone needs to get on that bus.
That's definitely one of the best things that people have told me, is that they're going to try. I appreciate just that little effort so much. Even from people who don't know me very well. And maybe it's easier for people who don't know me very well to use it. I don't know. But basically with non-binary people, you just got to talk to them, learn more about who they are, learn more about, how they identify. And that's really how the world is going to go. I mean, that's how we educate people. That's how we that's how we get the information out there, because it becomes a topic of discussion. Oh, I met a non-binary person today. Oh, non-binary, what does that mean? I'm like, well, let me tell you all about it.
And then go listen to QueerTrek episode 3.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean, again, it's like that's why we're here and what we do is we want to help educate the public and straight people as to what all of these terms mean in their spectrum. Because again, even being ace like does not necessarily mean that you experience no sexual attraction and you never have sex or any sexual desire.
Right.
Like there is a spectrum there. But it's so important to talk about these things, and in doing that, you empower others.
Yeah.
Just to say, oh, me too, in a good way, a good me too. Good Lord.
Not hashtag me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with asexuality too, because I think the number one response I always get when I tell people I'm asexual is, oh, does that mean you're a plant?
Well, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Mine is when I say I'm pansexual, do you have sex with pans?
Yep. I was like, I have a couple friends who identify as pansexual, and they're like, yeah, me and those frying pans.
So hot.
But actually there's unfortunately a lot of ace phobia within the LGBT community itself.
Yeah, we talked about we touched on it in episode 1, how there's a lot of this kind of ignorance and separation within the community itself. And a lot of people, myself included, I don't know everything about everyone or every situation, but I'm doing this podcast partly to learn about it and partly to spread the love for it. But it's awful that there's a lot of intolerance within our own community itself.
Right. Well, especially with asexuality, there's a lot of asexuals who their romantic orientation is not the same as their sexual orientation.
Right.
Yes.
So there are asexual people who are hetero-romantic, and that pisses a lot of LGBT people off for some reason, because they can, quote unquote, pass as a straight person. It's like the same as them saying, well, a bisexual person can also pass as a straight person because they can date someone of their opposite gender, which is a whole bunch of hooey balooey. Sorry, you can't use your share thing there. But
we're gonna have to get that in somehow.
I know. It'll slip out of
I'll just
me.
put it in the bloopers at the end.
Yeah. It'll slip out of me, I'm sure, at least once tonight. But yeah, I think that's where a majority of it comes from. My romantic orientation is kind of all over the place, mostly just because I don't have any romantic interests at the moment. And it's really odd for me to try and find a word that kind of fits, going back to my filing cabinet of labels. Because I don't have a specific gender, I don't like to use homoromantic, because I'm not a female that loves females, or a woman love women, or whatever. So I have been sort of just using panromantic, because pansexual for me kind of includes everybody. But it's important to note that sexual orientation and romantic orientation are not one and the same. There are some people who might be hetero-romantic but homosexual. You never really know.
And the opposite can be true too.
Exactly. And there are the people who are aromantic, so that the people who do not experience romantic
And
attraction.
that gets lumped in with the asexual. Like they just assume that asexual is
ace and
also
arrow,
aromantic. Yes, and no,
which is
that's
not
not.
always true.
No, I have an
Um,
asexual friend who is definitely not aromantic.
No.
She's poly and
Yep.
and bisexual and has
Yep.
girlfriends and so nope.
And
Sorry,
sometimes
guys.
you might get the cream of the crop, which is all three A's: the agender, asexual, aromantic people. Remember, folks, the A in the acronym does not stand for ally.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but
Thank you. Newsflash.
Yeah.
Every year, every June, but also the rest of the year, I see that happen so frequently. And listen, like we appreciate our allies. We
Don't
absolutely
get me wrong.
do.
I love my allies, but that A is not for you.
But no, by trying to claim that A as an ally, you are washing away the identity of asexual, aromantic, etc. people.
The triple A's.
So it's just, please don't do that, please.
Yeah. So that's really all I have to say about those two things, unless you have any questions about it.
You're an awesome guest, and thank you. No, you've taken the words out of my mouth so many times that I just reiterate them.
I aim to please, so
you do very well. You do very, very well. So I guess we can go ahead then and talk about these characters in Deep Space Nine.
Yes, so excited.
I'm just going to open this discussion by this very first quote you have here from your notes, which is in capital letters, which is, "Everyone on DS9 is queer except Space Dad Sisko, who is a father to all these queer children." And I kind of love it.
I read that and I was like, oh, this is going to be a great episode.
I just almost everyone on that show it has unfortunately it's not canon for the most part, but
we don't care about canon here.
You can attribute a queer identity to almost every single character on that show. And it's wonderful. And I love it. Live, breathe, and eat DS9 right now. So it's great.
I got stuck. I just watched, For the Uniform was the last episode I watched, and I watched it pre-STLV. That's how bad I am. I've had no time to watch TV.
Oh my God.
The only Star Trek I've watched is
I gotta pause you for a second.
Yeah.
So when I learned I was going to STLV this year, and I knew it was DS9's 25th anniversary, I hadn't seen a single episode since I was like tiny. So I didn't remember anything. I crunched all 7 seasons into 2 months and finished the Monday of the week of STLV.
I watched you do it. I was just like that. Woo! I am envious.
It was hard, but it was great.
I tried my very best, and all I got to was For the Uniform, and I still need to finish. But okay, so first character we're going to talk about happens to be like my favorite character in all of Star Trek, which is Dax.
Dax symbiont is placed into a host regardless of that host's gender identity, and that gender changes. So, we witness it. Curzon goes to Jadzia in like I think it's almost like the first or second episode of DS9. We watch the transfer of host to host.
Yeah.
So we witness it. They talk about it. They talk about their previous hosts all the time. There's nothing new. Everyone moves on with their lives. So Dax is a non-binary icon, and you can't change my mind.
No.
And I remember a couple weeks ago, you posted a meme on the QueerTrek Facebook group. I forget what specific episode it is. I'm terrible with episode titles. Jadzia is approached by the Klingon guy. I can't even remember his name.
It might be Blood Oath. I'm not.
So anyway, this guy comes up to her and calls her Curzon, and she's like, no, buddy, I'm Jadzia now. And without even skipping a beat, he's just like, okay, this is my friend Jadzia.
Yeah.
No problems.
Like, he got it. The rest of y'all need to get it. Like, come on.
And I'm pretty sure he was stupidly drunk. So if a drunk Klingon can get your name preferences and your pronoun preferences right on the first try, then you can too.
Yep.
No
That was
reservations
the
about it.
best.
Absolutely none at all. Yeah, it's basically equivalent to using the preferred names and pronouns of your non-binary friends and family. So the drunk Klingon can do it, so can you. And also Dax, the actual symbiont, they don't have genders. You never hear the Trill specifically call a symbiont a he or a she or they even. There's nothing that specifically says that the symbionts have gender.
Yeah.
So the gender of the host changes. The Dax symbiont is genderless, I guess you could go ahead and say. And even Esri, in the first few episodes of season 7 of DS9, because she was not prepared to receive a symbiont, she even says, "Oh, these pronouns are gonna drive me crazy." And I was just like, "Oh my God, Esri, you're a non-binary disaster, and I love you." But so it's really important, especially for people who identify with these, things, I guess you could say, that these labels that aren't really well known, they're complex. They don't really have one meaning to them. It's really important for people to see that kind of representation, whether it's canon or not. It's really important for people to see that. I watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of Netflix. I relate to a lot of characters, and it's so nice for me to, when I need to go into my zone, my safe space, that I have characters to sort of piggyback off of. Which actually brings me to a point that I didn't put into my notes about Chase Masterson's charity, Pop Hero Culture, which is basically trying to eradicate bullying, misogyny, and all those things through TV and film. I find it super important because there are kids out there who are, might see a gay character on TV and know that that character is okay and they're loved by their friends and they're loved by their family. That's so important, especially to the younger generations. So
we've said it many times that representation matters.
Yeah. So when I find a character that I love, it's almost like I do everything in my power to sort of like, oh, I can definitely see how this person is non-binary or how this person is asexual. We'll actually talk about it after we get through the next couple of characters. About someone actually presented a really good argument for a DS9 character being ace, and I was just like, oh my God, you're so right. And now I can't get it out of my head, and I love it. My favorite character. But we'll get there soon.
Okay.
But to have Dax be that non-canon, unfortunately, representation of a non-binary individual was super important for me to witness, especially in a Star Trek series, which happens to be my favorite Trek series too. So I was really happy to see that.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to see other people go through the same thing. They see it too, which makes my little queer heart super elated. I love it.
Yeah, I admired Terry Farrell for coming out. It was a couple years at STLV and basically said that Jadzia was pansexual.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, like I don't care about canon. Like and that's again with this podcast, part of why we're doing it is to show how people connect and identify from a queer angle, and it doesn't bleep bleep share the high note. It doesn't matter what canon has to say about it. It just doesn't. It's the fact that someone connects and finds representation or just some inkling of something to grasp onto that says it's okay to be this way.
Even Nikki DeBoer, who played Esri in season 7 at STLV this year, mentioned something about Dax being super important to transgender non-binary people. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to talk to her after that because she was swamped with autograph and picture thing.
Yeah. There was an article, I don't remember if it was written for Women at Warp, if Women at Warp retweeted it, or there was an article somewhere with, I think it was a trans woman talking about the importance of Dax. It was like a year or so ago, or maybe longer, which is why I don't remember a lot of it. I'll try to find it and then put it in our show notes. But that she's really the Dax symbiont, and the stories surrounding Dax are really kind of the only good stories we get for the trans community in Star Trek. And we talked a little bit about like the host, which is a TNG episode, which is the first time that we met the Trill and Symbiont, and how at the end of that, the host went from being a man to a Beverly couldn't accept that. And that's absolutely fine, because you can't expect a heterosexual person to just switch.
But then you get that wonderful episode Rejoined.
Yes.
In DS9, directed by God bless Avery Brooks. Where it basically shows you that, you kind of have fallen in love for that individual personality rather than what they present.
And I think that even in the host, like Beverly loved Odan. Anyway, and like for me, and as part of the conversation, I think we might have had it in the Patreon outtake stuff, but for me, I see so many couples within the trans community that, it may be you might have a woman and a man, and then the man decides that, he is a woman and he wants to transition. And they get through that, and they're still a couple because that love is there. The person doesn't necessarily change. Like,
I have a friend on Facebook whose husband just transitioned. I had a friend in college whose dad transitioned, and now he has 2 moms. I
have several, and I feel like, that's one place where, and of course this was 90s Trek, so we didn't see it, but I mean, yes, there is validity to, you can't expect a person to change their sexual identity necessarily, but at the same time, when you have that relationship established and you've got that love, then sometimes that stuff doesn't necessarily matter. And I think that that's just a good use of the Trill, and I don't know what the future of Star Trek has with the Dax symbiont, but I would love to see more. And the Dax symbiont is just such a good vehicle for telling trans and LGB plus stories. We'll just have to.
Well, it's actually it's a funny side note. So most people perceive me as a girl, and I am personally only interested in dating women or feminine presenting people. And I recently had someone tell me, oh, I'm kind of attracted to you. And that's when I went ahead and told them, I'm like, well, here's some things about me you might not know. I identify as non-binary, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, I identify as a lesbian. And if you're not a girl, what does that make me? I was like, I can't tell you. He's like, am I bisexual now? I'm like, I don't know.
That's a question for you to figure out. And that is, that happens. And that's why I think I said in our first episode, our identities are often fluid. Like, we change. Sometimes, we may know who we are. Like, I knew from a young age that I liked women, but I didn't really embrace it until I was much older and in a place where I was secure in my identity and my identity safety and everything else. And even now, I don't know, I'm not going to not like women anymore, but just even going from identifying as bisexual to pansexual and realizing I'm attracted to people that are non-binary, that don't identify with any gender or sexuality. It can change, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that is a good opportunity for your friend to explore who they are.
Well, it actually brings me nicely into my next character.
Yeah.
Odo. Show us some Odo love. I love Odo.
I love Odo too.
So I personally see Odo as both non-binary and asexual, which was super important for me. There are some people who also see him as aromantic, but I don't. So I'm not going to talk about his romantic orientation. But basically, Odo presents male and uses he, him. That is the biggest argument against him being non-binary. Okay, Odo is a changeling. Odo's true form is a pile of goo. You fools. He is a sentient pile of goo. The only reason he looks the way he does is because he mimics Dr. Mora, who is the scientist who was in charge of pretty much figuring out what Odo was during the Cardassian occupation. If Dr. Mora had been female, we probably would have had a female Odo. Let's be real.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what Odo looks like or what he presents as. You can't tell that someone is non-binary simply by looking at them. We've talked about this earlier in the podcast. It's just like you can't tell if someone is transgender just by looking at them. So it doesn't matter how he presents. Basically, his true form is goop. He lives in a bucket every 16 hours. You can't be like, that pile of goop right there is male. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you 100% positive? Could be anything. It could be a rock. We don't know. He freaking transforms into light at the end of the episode Chimera in season 7. You can't put gender on a light.
No.
And when he transforms into animals, how do you know that the animals
exactly
into are male?
Not a male hawk or a female hawk.
The next biggest argument about Odo being non-binary is the female, quote unquote, changeling. The female, I put it in quotes because there's no such thing as a female changeling. The link is a giant lake of goo, you guys. Have you seen it lately? It's just full of it's just changelings that are in their true form, as it almost looks like rubber cement. I mean,
it's a giant cuddle puddle, is what it is.
It is.
Oh, I like. Oh, yay! I like it.
So I don't know why the writers decided to give the founder a pair of boobs is beyond me. They're literally useless. But they
were looking for their sexy alien character, and
she was not a sexy alien character.
No,
I'm sorry.
No.
She even had the same hair as Odo, and that bothered me because Odo got his hair from Dr. Mora.
Yeah.
So the fact that almost all of the changelings we met had the same hairstyle was just like, that didn't agree with me. But I'm assuming that the writers probably just needed the evil opposite to Odo's good-natured maleness.
Yeah.
We call this cis normativity.
Yeah.
We have to have the female to the male.
We need to put like a ding 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 noise there, because I mean,
there's the heteros. There they are.
Like that really drives the nail into this, is that they felt like they had to give these characters this kind of identity instead of just leaving them ambiguous or non-binary or whatever. It's like, nope, we've got to make this one a dude because he's going to have relations and such.
And this one is a girl because it's got boobs.
Yeah, got to put those boobs there to make sure you know it's a woman.
Because there are a lot of men that have boobs. It's true. I mean,
and I know women that don't have boobs.
Exactly. So boobs is not a gender identifier. Sorry,
Nope.
folks. It's not gonna it doesn't work that way. The next biggest argument for him is because, oh, well, he's in love with Kira. We mentioned this earlier in the podcast that sexual and romantic attraction are two separate entities. But then he also had relations with that humanoid girl. I don't remember the episode or exactly what her name was, but she was like an undercover spy, and she was they like physically altered her so that they wouldn't find out or something. But asexual people can still have sex. I mean, just because you don't experience the attraction, you know, it doesn't mean there are some asexuals out there that enjoy having sex. And there's some that don't. It doesn't make them any less asexual. It's about the attraction, not the drive. And even Rene Auberjonois has stated that he always felt Odo was asexual.
Fist pump.
Yeah, and that also was super important for me that he saw it as well. It's just like Terry Farrell coming out and saying, well, Jadzia was pansexual. I'm like, yeah, she was. So for Renee to say, oh, Odo's he's asexual, guys, let's shush.
Kitty agrees.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. We also never really see Odo in a sexual manner outside of that one time he had sex with that humanoid girl. Thank goodness. Because when they had the character arc with Kira, which I did not enjoy. I did not like the character, the pairing of Odo and Kira. I didn't like it at all. But, you know, God forbid someone has a life without a romantic or a sexual relationship. Oh God, what's gonna happen? I think it was forced and unnecessary to the plot. This is called heteronormativity. You know, oh, we got our straight couple. We're good. We can wrap it up here. Even Nana Visitor said that she fought the Odo-Kira relationship because she wanted to prove that girls and boys can just be friends. There doesn't have to be any awkward sexual tension between them, and they don't ever have to get together. But, you know, if she was going to fight anything, I'm glad she fought against the Kira Ducat romance and won that war. I would much rather watch Kira and Odo all day than Kira and Ducat. I can't do it. Which brings me actually into my next character, which is Kira.
The moment you've
She's
been waiting for.
I love her. She is my favorite character ever. It just so happens that I share her name, which actually kind of makes it a little weird that her name is Kira, mostly because I had a huge crush on her. And the last two girls I've ever had crushes on's names were Kira too.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if it's a thing.
I'm sensing a pattern.
I'm guessing that if
this
is Kira, chances are I'm 40% attracted to you. At least.
My mind is being blown because you are intendant Kira.
I know.
I
was just like, oh my God, I really am the intendant.
You are.
God, what am I? But I do really love. Technically, her name's Nerys, guys. Okay.
Yeah, whatever.
But when I first started watching DS9 and we kind of got into learning who Kira was as a character, I always thought she was bisexual. I always saw it. I was just like, she's my angry bisexual wife. I can't. That's just who she is. If it wasn't for her pointless relationships with Shakar and Bareil, I believe it would be 100% women loving women gay. However, as I stated previously, someone recently pointed out to me that Kira could be asexual as well. And it wasn't even like an argument. It was literally a picture of Kira with the caption underneath that said, asexual character of the day. And I saw it and I was just like, what? Are you kidding me? So then of course, I'm asexual, so I started kind of putting it together, and trying to find a way that I could see her as asexual. But I literally just brought up her two boyfriends, so and you see her with them in like a sexual manner, both of them. But like, if you were listening, I told you asexuality was a spectrum. Some asexuals experience sexual attraction, but it's so little, it's so rare that it doesn't really count as sexual attraction. We kind of call them gray aces because it's like a gray area. If I were to not be using the term straight up asexual, I would probably consider myself a gray ace. Some asexuals need to form a super deep emotional bond with their partners in order to experience sexual attraction, and we call them demisexuals.
Yep.
So therefore, it's actually really safe to say that Kira could be gray or demisexual, because before Bareil, before Shakar, before Odo, Kira does not really put out any kind of sexual energy.
No.
She is perfectly fine going about the station without being in a relationship, without wanting to be in a relationship. And I kind of like that about her. And, Odo was the same way, until we find out that he was pining for Kira in like season 4 in that episode Heart of Stone. I always thought that he didn't have any kind of sexual or romantic interests in anybody. And then they threw in the Kira interest, and I was just like, oh, really? It had to be my wife? Are you serious? But I honestly think Kira's asexuality is the most evident when she's with Odo, who is also ace. They are intimate with each other. You see it. They have a romantic relationship that they are both happy with. And I personally don't think there is any need for them to have sex ever. And you never see it.
Yeah.
You
And I
never
never get that vibe. Like, I never get the vibe that they're all boning somewhere. And I get really frustrated because the first thing I hear often is, well, what about Odo down there?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what about it?
I know.
Like,
who cares?
What about it?
What about it? So they are a queer power couple, and we're moving on.
Can we call this episode the queer power couple?
Yes.
It would take away from your story because you're not the queer power couple. You're in your own idea, but still. I love it.
It's okay. But if Kira is asexual, it actually makes so much more sense that her mirror universe counterpart, the Intendant, my other wife, is hypersexual. I mean, there are some mirror universe characters that are obviously not the polar opposite of their prime universe characters, but this is one of the big ones where they are completely opposite. I mean, you've got Major Kira, who is like completely morally set straight on, everything I do is for the good of the many, that kind of person. And then you've got the vile, manipulative, saucy Intendant who's just like, I'm going to see anything that has two legs as a sex object, and kind of go from there. So if Major Kira and the Intendant are polar opposites, then it makes sense that Major Kira is asexual and her mirror universe counterpart is hypersexual.
I like this perspective because I feel like it gives more agency and empowerment to Intendant Kira instead of the assumption that she's just a bisexual trope.
Right. Well, I mean, it does bother me that they use the whole femme fatale trope.
Yeah.
And especially since she is the Intendant, she is technically a Star Trek villain. She's clearly got some kind of queer personality that they used her as a villain.
Yeah.
Well, you're gays. You either kill them off or you make them evil.
Yep.
So it did kind of bother me that that's the way it went, but she was beautiful and I loved her.
Yeah, like I can't, and again, I hate to keep saying over and over, that's why we're here. But I think it's one of the questions that popped into my mind when I was thinking about having you on, is knowing how much you love the Intendant, especially,
Mm-hmm.
and how you process the use of her fitting in with that trope. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, yes, there's validity to the way that she was written in that representation.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you're also identifying with her in your own way.
Yeah.
And like, this is a perspective that straight people aren't going to have. Like, sorry, hopefully I don't offend straight people, but so
I can't imagine any straight person coming up with this theory. I just can't.
I mean, props to anyone who does. Hey,
hey, if you were thinking about this and you're straight, wow, come talk to me. I
Yeah.
want to came to
but
that conclusion.
it's like I hear from a lot of the LGBTQ plus community, that Star Trek puts these characters in front of us and then washes away their queerness with heteronormativity, etc. And yes, I think that's true in a respect, but at the same time, there are still people in the queer community identifying with these characters, seeing representation, and that's why I think it's really important to make sure that we tell those stories and include that in what we're doing.
I mean, look at the relationship between Bashir and Garrick.
Yep.
I mean, that is the biggest one. And even Andy Robinson and Alexander Siddig have been so into it. I mean, Andy Robinson loves it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like his favorite thing to talk about. We saw Bashir kind of get straight washed again.
Yeah.
He was, pining after Jadzia when he should have been pining after Garrick.
Hell yeah.
Dumbest story arc.
Pansexual lizard, by the way. And then we saw him again go for Esri, which I was not happy with that. It felt like a consolation prize for not being able to get Jadzia. But I mean, Bashir, if anything, should have been at least bisexual in canon.
Well, and then you've got Garrick with Zial, who I love Zial. She's like one of my favorite characters that we don't see enough of. And I enjoyed Garrick and Zial, but at the same time, like,
I know. Well, heteronormativity. We got to have the girls.
Gotta have that in the Star Treks. Like, I'm looking at your notes here, and like, yes, I totally am down with the Kira Dax relationship, and I may have already fantasized about that previously. But I also, like, I'm totally on board with Bashir and Garrick. Like, I wish that had happened.
Yeah. Can you imagine how different Deep Space Nine would have been if it
my God.
was made today?
Yes, let's reboot DS9. Let's not, but
no.
But at the same time, let's do it.
There is fanfic out there, people.
Yeah, I was gonna say thank God for fan fiction and fan artists.
Yep. But yeah, like, Star Trek was gay long before, Discovery
So I have a
the birth of fan fiction came from Kirk and Spock.
Yep.
I have a Star Trek Tumblr that I run. So I follow pretty much only Star Trek blogs so I can reblog their posts. And I actually saw one the other day, and it was a text post, and it said, "Can you imagine what Star Trek would be like without all of the straight washing?" And someone replied with, "It would be too powerful."
It would be pretty amazing.
Kind of going back to Odo real quick. No one goes through more self-doubt than I do about my identity. And there was a point when the female changing, the founder, was talking to Odo, and she was talking to Odo about his love for Kira. And she said something along the lines of, "She'll never love you. You are a changeling." And this tells us a lot about Odo's attitude towards himself and his self-worth. And it's very personal to me because, say it this way, she'll never love you. You are asexual. You are non-binary. So no one will experience more doubt than I will. I think about it all the time. No one will ever love me because of who and what I am. These things are so fundamental to my identity as a human being. And so as much as I hated the Odo Kira love arc, I'm super glad that Odo was not, in fact, unlovable. That comforts me a lot. I, of course, when I'm feeling super down about myself, will go find and search out happy stories about people with, my specific identities, to know, just so I know that there is hope out there for me. I'm a pretty lonely person sometimes, but I'm pretty glad that I see these characters for the queer people that they are, and that they do in fact get their shot at love and relationships, and even if they don't end the way we want them to, it gives me comfort to know that everything turned out okay for them. Yeah.
Can I hug you?
Yes.
Can I hug my...
Hi, hugs.
I'm trying to hug.
Heather hugs.
I'm trying to hug.
There's song lyrics from the Dear Evan Hansen musical. So there's a song that talks kind of about this, and the lyrics are, even if you've always been that barely in the background kind of guy, you still matter. And even if you're somebody who can't escape the feeling that the world's passed you by, you still matter. If you get around to doing something, if you never get around to doing some remarkable thing, that doesn't mean you're not worth remembering.
Aww. That's so sweet.
And I always turn to these lyrics when I'm feeling, down about something, or not feeling like, every now and again I get into those moods where I feel like I don't really matter to people. People just tolerate me and things like that. And that's where a lot of my anxiety and depression come from. But all these.
Holla at you, boy. I am the
Yeah.
same way. Ugh, it's terrible.
But I always think about these lyrics because it's something that means a lot to me, and it really touches me, So I wanted to pass that along. Just
thank you. I really appreciate that.
so on that note, Kira, is there anything else that you would like to discuss?
Not today. Maybe tomorrow. But
Heather, do you have any final thoughts?
I just think we need to have Kira back for Queer Deep Space Nine Part 2.
I'm so on board with this.
We can do deep dive into Bashir and Garrick and everyone else.
We should.
Yes.
That sounds like an excellent idea. But until then, let's go around the table and let everybody know how they can get a hold of us. Kira, you're the guest. How can people get a hold of you if they'd like to continue the conversation?
So probably the best way is, if you're not, I'm on the QueerTrek Facebook page. You can always DM me through there. But I also have a Twitter handle. My Twitter handle is shark_o_saurus. So it just reads Sharkosaurus.
It's a pretty awesome Twitter handle.
Thanks. I love it. I work with sharks, so that's where it comes from. Can certainly reach me through Twitter as well. So those are the best ways to get in touch with me.
And Heather, how can people find you if they'd like to continue the conversation?
Well, I just have to thank Kira for mentioning our QueerTrek group, because yes, we have a group on Facebook that we often forget to talk about.
Hi, you're welcome.
Yes, it's QueerTrek, and when you find it, the header is our podcast image, so it should be pretty easy. So I am in that group, and then I am also in the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook, which is kind of where we were born from. But then on Twitter, I am LLA Posper, which is LLAPAWSPER. And then our show is at QueerTrek Pod. And the rest of our network shows you can find via at Tricorder Show on Twitter. And then we're the tricordertransmissions.com on the interwebs. And Marty, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Time Travel Marty. I am in both the QueerTrek Facebook group as well as the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group as well. And then, of course, you can always support the show and the network on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but we also have a couple ways you can leave us voicemails. You can leave us a voicemail by visiting thetricordertransmissions.com and clicking the SpeakPipe link right there on the page and leave a message through your phone or computer. You can also call our voicemail line at, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the number, 609-512-LLAP, 609-512-5527. We'd love to hear from you, and if you leave us a voicemail, we might play it on the air, so that's super exciting too. And of course, you can leave us your suggestions, ideas, comments, feedback, all of that through the QueerTrek page at queertrek.thetricordertransmissions.com.
Ooh, and leave us a review on iTunes because I don't think we have any yet.
Leave us a star rating and review on iTunes. It helps us out with visibility. We don't want your compliments. We just want people to find the show easier. But I mean, your compliments are nice too. But on that note, I think we will end by saying, live, love, and prosper.
Namaste.
Mwah.